I know what falling feels like. Not the stumbling kind, not the catching yourself on the way down kind of. The kind where someone you trusted put their hands on your back and pushed, deliberately, calmly, like they had been thinking about it for a long time and had finally decided the moment was right. The rooftop of the Ashford building was 42 floors above the city. I know because I counted them once as a child, standing in the elevator beside my brother. Dorian had laughed at me for counting, said only nervous people did that. I was not nervous that night on the roof. I was stupid, which is worse, because nervous people stay alert. Stupid people turn their backs on their brothers at the edge of a 42-story building because they cannot imagine that the person they grew up with is capable of what is about to happen. I felt his hands before I understood what they were doing. Two flat palms between my shoulder blades. One clean shove, and then there was nothing under my feet. Just air. Just the city rushing up toward me with terrible patience. Just wind that had no interest in my survival. I had 4 seconds. I know because I counted those too. On the first second, I understood what had happened. On the second second, I thought about my mother. On the third second, I thought about everything I had built and everything I had lost and everything I had handed to my brother without understanding I was handing it over. On the fourth second, I made a promise. Not to God, not to the universe, to myself. If there is anything after this, if there is another side to the city rushing up toward me, I will not be this person again. I will not be the person who trusted the wrong hands at the wrong height. I will not build things and let other people put their names on them. I will not be useful to someone who sees me as a problem to be eventually solved. Never again. And then the city arrived, and everything stopped, and then everything started. Air hit my lungs like a punishment. I gasped so hard I nearly fell off the bed. My hands grabbed at the sheets. My eyes opened to darkness and adjusted and found a ceiling I had not seen in 3 years. Dark wood beams, a water stain shaped like a crescent moon in the far left corner. My childhood bedroom in the Ashford estate. I sat up slowly. The way you move when you are not certain your body belongs to you yet. My hands were young, smooth, unmarked by the 3 years of building and losing and dying that my mind remembered with complete and terrible clarity. I looked at my phone on the nightstand. March 3rd. I set it down, pressed both palms flat against the mattress, breathed. 2 days before the Ashford inheritance ceremony, 3 years before the rooftop, 3 years before Dorian's hands between my shoulder blades, 3 years before 4 seconds of falling and a promise made to no one but myself. I was back at the very beginning. And this time I already knew how the story ended, which meant this time I got to write a different one. Let me tell you about the Ashford inheritance before I tell you what I did with it, because you need to understand what was on that table. The Ashford family did not pass down money at the ceremony. Money was handled through lawyers and estate documents like everyone else. What the Ashfords passed down was older than money, more dangerous than money. 2 systems. Bloodline abilities cultivated over 4 generations and activated by choice at a ceremony that every Ashford heir had attended since my great-grandfather invented the tradition. The first system was the crown. And I need you to understand that the crown was not a trick, not a trap dressed up to fool the foolish. It was real, devastatingly real. Status that didn't need to be performed because it simply existed in the air around whoever carried it. Rooms that shifted when you entered. People who leaned forward before you finished your first sentence. Investors who said yes to things they had been refusing for months. Money attracting more money the way heat attracts heat. Opportunity appearing without being chased. Every door opening before you raised your hand to knock. My grandfather called it the system for men in a hurry. He did not say it admiringly, but he said it. And 4 generations of eldest Ashford sons had reached for it with both hands and experienced the same magnificent, invisible destruction. Because here is what nobody talked about. The crown attracted everything, including the wrong things. It did not discriminate between genuine opportunity and gilded trap. It pulled loyal allies and perfectly disguised enemies into the same orbit with equal magnetic force. And it made whoever carried it feel so certain of their own judgment that they stopped questioning which was which. The second system was the seed. The seed looked like nothing, felt like nothing when it activated. A quiet hum in the chest. A faint warmth that could be dismissed as nerves. Something that had been chosen last 4 generations in a row and had made its peace with that pattern. But here is what 4 generations of impatient men had never stayed still long enough to discover. The seed was a compounding system. Whatever you fed it doubled, then doubled again, then doubled again. Without stopping, without a ceiling, without mercy. Every skill, every discipline, every hour of genuine focused work. Every difficult choice made when the easier option was right there waiting. All of it fed into the seed. All of it came back twice as powerful the following day. The problem was patience. Month 1, the seed gave you almost nothing measurable. Month 3, something modest. Something that looked like slow, unremarkable progress compared to the crown's immediate explosion of power and magnetism. Something that looked exactly like losing. In my previous life, I had spent 3 years with the seed and never understood what I held. Because Dorian had spent those same 3 years making sure I stayed too busy surviving to discover what I was actually capable of. A compound introduced into my food, gradually, professionally, by someone I trusted completely. Degrading my judgment so slowly, I never noticed until the toxicology report came back 3 weeks before the roof, 3 weeks before the city, 3 weeks before his hands between my shoulder blades. This time, I had that report ordered on day 1. Not for me. For Dr. Philip Crane. The ceremony was held in the main hall of the Ashford estate. Dark mahogany walls. The fireplace that had been burning continuously since my grandfather commissioned it 40 years ago. Lawyers in a formal row along the left wall. Distant relatives in chairs along the right. My father at the head of the room, looking like a man completing an obligation he believed in but found heavy. And Dorian. Standing near the fireplace with a glass of whiskey he didn't need, wearing a suit that had been tailored to make everyone in the room feel slightly underdressed, smiling at everyone with the specific warmth of a man who already knew he was about to win. He looked at me once when I walked in. Brief, dismissive, the look you give furniture. In my previous life, that look had lodged in my chest like a splinter. This time I noted it the way you note weather, useful information. Nothing more. My father placed both systems on the table between us. The crown breathed amber light, not pulsed. Breathed, like concentrated ambition given physical form. Like every shortcut ever taken, and every door ever forced, and every room ever dominated, compressed into a single glowing object. The light it cast made everyone in the room stand slightly straighter. The lawyers who had been arranging papers for 30 minutes looked up simultaneously. The distant relatives stopped mid-whisper. Even my father, who had carried the crown himself for 20 years, stood differently when it appeared on the table. The seed sat beside it in its simple case, a dull green flicker, uncertain. The kind of light that asked nothing of the room and received nothing in return. As Ashford tradition dictates, the elder son has first selection. Dorian moved before the sentence finished. Not rudely, with the absolute certainty of a man who has never seriously considered the possibility of not getting what he reached for. His hand closed around the crown. The amber light flared up his arm like recognition, like something ancient greeting something it had been expecting. The room inhaled, collectively, involuntarily. Dorian looked at me and smiled. The smile of a man who had already won and was generous enough not to gloat too obviously. Just enough. Just enough to make sure I knew. I reached forward and picked up the seed. The flicker steadied slightly in my grip. The quiet hum settled behind my sternum. Patient, waiting. I closed my fingers around it and thought about the rooftop. About 4 seconds, about the promise. I kept my face completely still, and I waited for the show to begin. What nobody tells you about being handed the thing that looks like losing is how clarifying it is. When you have nothing that impresses anyone, you stop performing for audiences. You stop spending energy on the version of yourself that exists in other people's minds, and you start spending all of it on the version that exists in the quiet hours before anyone else is awake. I was running at 5 every morning before the estate stirred. Not because I had always been a runner, because I wanted to feel the seed work, to understand its language. On the 5th mile of my 3rd morning, I felt something shift. Not dramatically, not like a switch, like a door that had been slightly ajar, opening one more inch. A recalibration so subtle it could have been imagination, except the sixth mile was faster than the fifth. And the next morning, the fifth mile arrived earlier than it had the day before. I went home and sat with that for a long time. Then I opened a notebook, not to write plans, to write evidence, because I had 3 years of memory from my previous life. 3 years of watching 3 specific people destroy my brother from the inside while the crown kept him too magnetized by my own success to notice the rot underneath. Marcus Webb, the investment banker. Structured vehicles that looked brilliant from outside and were engineered to collapse from within. Celeste Harmon, the socialite, indispensable to Dorian's public image, feeding his vulnerabilities to competitors with the careful patience of a professional. And Dr. Philip Crane, the family physician, the most dangerous of the 3, on a competitor's payroll for 2 years before the ceremony. The man who had introduced the compound into my food with the calm precision of someone who had done it before and expected to do it again. I had the toxicology report ordered on day 3 of my rebirth. The results confirmed what I already knew. I opened my laptop, created a folder, named it simply Evidence, 3 subfolders, Webb, Harmon, Crane. I began filling them, one document at a time, one observation at a time, one carefully preserved piece of truth at a time. While Dorian blazed across the city, I sat in mine and built something he couldn't see. Something that had no shine, something that had no audience. Something that was going to outlast everything he was currently performing. Dorian's transformation was not subtle. Within days of the ceremony, not weeks, days, he walked into a meeting with a client who had been refusing to sign for 8 months. 40 minutes later, the client signed. Not because Dorian said anything brilliant, because the crown walked into the room and the room reorganized itself. My father called it remarkable. The lawyers called it instinct. The press called Dorian Ashford a name to watch. I read the article at 5 in the morning between my second and third hour of work. Filed it, went back to work. Month 4. A mid-level investment analyst, a firm with no connection to the Ashford name. 20 minutes agreed to as professional courtesy. He sat across from me with the body language of a man who expected to be politely bored. 14 minutes in, something changed. I watched it happen in real time. The pen stopped moving, the posture shifted, the eyes focused differently, not on the Ashford name, on me, on what I was saying, on the specific way I was connecting things he had not seen connected before. We stayed for 2 hours. At the end, he handed me his card, said, "I want to know what you do next." I drove home, pulled over on a quiet street, sat with the engine running for a long time, because something had happened in that room that had nothing to do with the family name. Something entirely mine. The seed was beginning to show. Month 8. This was when Crane noticed me. It started with something small, the way dangerous things always start. I was in the estate library reviewing documents when Dr. Philip Crane came in for what appeared to be a routine visit with my father. He stopped when he saw me. Just for a moment, a fraction of a second longer than a casual stop. Then he smiled. The warm, professional smile I had known my entire previous life. "Elias," he said, "you look well." "Thank you," I said. "So do you." He tilted his head slightly. "You seem different lately." He said it the way you say something you have been thinking about for some time and have finally decided to test out loud. I kept my face neutral. "Different how?" I said. "More focused," he said. "More settled." He paused. "It suits you." Then he walked past me toward my father's study. I stood in the library long after his footsteps faded. Then I opened my notebook and wrote 4 words. Crane has noticed me. I want you to understand what that meant, because from the outside it meant nothing. A physician commenting on improved focus. But I knew Crane. Not the version the family knew, the version I had learned to see. Crane was not just a physician. He was an operator. And operators do not make casual observations without purpose, which meant he had already been observing me. I just hadn't seen it yet. That night I checked whether I had been followed. I had not, but I checked anyway, and that was the important part. Month 9. The toxicology report on Crane came back from the independent lab. Clean. I stared at it for a long time. Clean meant only 2 things. Either I was early, or I was wrong. I called the toxicologist. explained what I was looking for. There was a pause on the line. Then she said the compound I described would not show on a standard panel. You need to know exactly what you're looking for, she said. I said, I do. She said, send a new sample. I said, I will. 2 weeks later, I had what I needed. A residue test from a glass used at a family dinner. 72 hours later, I read the results 3 times. The compound was there, not in me, not yet, but in Crane's possession, in his medical bag, which meant the timeline had not changed. He was already active, already preparing, already waiting. The only question left was whether I had been targeted, or always had been. Month 10. Motion detected. East Wing. My room. I pulled up the security feed and saw him, Dr. Crane. He was not rushing, not searching like a thief in panic. He was methodical, precise, the way someone searches when they expect to leave no trace. He checked the desk, the bookshelf, the nightstand. He spent 4 minutes on my laptop, not opening it, scanning it, reading its memory, mapping it. He was not looking for proof. He was looking for patterns. Why the investment timing shifted, why the toxicology requests went external, why Elias Ashford no longer behaved like Elias Ashford. He put everything back exactly as he found it and left. Professional, invisible, controlled. I sat in my car afterward, trying to separate knowledge from fear. What I knew was simple. He was watching me. What I feared was worse. That I had been focused on Dorian so completely I had underestimated the man who had already ended my life once before. Not with his hands, but with what he put in my food. Slowly, precisely, until I could be pushed. And now he was in my room. I made 3 decisions that night. Move everything off the estate network, create a false trail, and delay Meridian by 4 months. It was not clean, it was not elegant, but it was necessary. Then I called the medical board and filed the complaint, with everything I had, at 4:47 in the morning, and went for my run. Because the seed does not care about setbacks, it only cares what you do next. The seed does not care about setbacks, it only cares what you do next. And what came next was not silence, not recovery, but pressure. Apex was still rising, still louder, still pulling capital away from everything quieter than itself. But something about it was starting to feel wrong, like a structure built too fast to understand its own weight. The first real shift came in month 5 of the external cycle. A financial journalist published an article that did not accuse Apex of failure. It did something more dangerous. It asked questions about methodology, questions about how a firm that young could produce returns that consistent, questions Apex could not answer without revealing that there was nothing underneath the imitation. The answers from Apex were polished, confident, completely hollow. And in finance, hollow does not stay hidden for long. It spreads. Institutional investors began asking the same questions internally. Then they began answering them. And the answers always led to the same place. No foundation, only acceleration. The first withdrawal was quiet, the second was faster, the third was decisive. And just like that, momentum reversed. Not slowly, not gracefully, but the way it always does when belief runs out. Meanwhile, Meridian had not changed. It still did what it always did. Slow compounding, patient structure. No noise, no urgency. Just time doing what time does when it is respected. The difference now was perception. People were finally beginning to understand that what Apex had was speed, and what Meridian had was depth, and speed only works until it meets resistance. The resistance arrived in the form of capital hesitation. Investors who had reduced positions began reconsidering. Those who had paused began returning, and new firms appeared quietly, carefully, asking the same question in different ways. What actually survives? Nolan called me one morning. He did not sound surprised anymore, only tired and certain. He said 3 more firms came back. I said, I know. He said, Apex is collapsing faster than anyone expected. I said it was always going to. He was silent for a moment. Then he asked how I knew. I said, because the seed does not scale imitation. It only scales understanding, and imitation always breaks when tested long enough. By month 6, Meridian was no longer under pressure. It was under review, then under reconsideration, then under expansion. Capital returned, not all at once, but in waves. Careful at first, then confident, then committed. The story had changed, and stories move money faster than numbers ever do. And then Dorian came. He did not come to the estate, he came to the office, 47th floor. No announcement, no ceremony, just presence. He stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at the room like it was unfamiliar territory. Not because it was impressive, but because it was real. He sat down, did not speak immediately. When he finally did, his voice was quieter than I expected. He said, "I know Meridian is yours." I said yes. He nodded slowly, not surprised, just confirming something he had already accepted. He said, "I built Apex to compete with you without knowing I was competing with you." I said, "I know." Silence followed, not heavy, just final. Then he said something I did not expect. He said, "It's better than mine." Not louder, not faster, better, because it was built, not copied. I looked at him for a long time, and I understood something important. The crown had never made him my enemy. It had just made him faster at becoming what he thought he should be. He asked me one last question. Does the compound explain everything? I thought about the rooftop, about the fall, about 4 seconds of certainty that something had been wrong long before the push. And I said the truth. It removes resistance, but it does not create intent. Intent was already there, in every choice, every assumption, every invisible hierarchy that had been accepted without question. He understood that. I could see it. Then he asked what I wanted. I slid the folder across the table. He read it slowly. When he finished, he said, "I don't deserve this level of fairness." I said, "I know." He signed anyway. Not because he had to, but because for the first time he understood what he had actually been part of. And understanding changes everything. 3 months later, Meridian was on the cover of a financial publication. Not Apex, not the crown, Meridian. And the question they asked me was simple. What do you choose when you are standing at the beginning of something that looks like nothing? I thought about everything, and I said the truth. The crown gives you everything immediately. The seed gives you everything eventually. And most people cannot survive the gap between those two truths. My brother chose what shines. I chose what grows. And that difference became the rest of our lives. Not everything valuable arrives quickly. Not everything powerful announces itself. And not every victory looks like one in the beginning. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is being underestimated. Sometimes the thing that looks smallest becomes the thing that changes everything. Sometimes the seed wins. And sometimes the only difference between success and failure is whether you were willing to keep going long enough to find out. Thank you for listening. The end. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Every story we share here is about choices, consequences, growth, and the moments that quietly shape who we become. And if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or forced to take the long road while everyone else seemed to be racing ahead, then this story was for you. Leave a comment below and tell me, if you had been standing in that room, would you have chosen the crown or the seed? I'd love to hear your answer. And if you enjoyed this journey, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one, because the next story is already waiting, and it just might change the way you see everything. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.